Hi everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my weekly reading wrap up. So, oh boy, do we got some books to talk about. I have 20 books to talk about. Yeah, that's a thing. Part of it is that I did my reading wrap up for last week like a day early. So there's a couple books that I read that day that are like scooped into this one. And then there's some that I kind of binged them a little quicker than maybe I normally would because maybe the story wasn't my favorite. That's something that happens to me. If a book isn't as good as others, sometimes it gets skimmed a little bit faster than some. But let's go ahead and dive into this. And the first one that we'll talk about is The Rogue of Fifth Avenue by Joanna Shupe. This is the historical romance buddy read that we're doing this month on my Discord. This is a Gilded Age historical romance, which means it takes place in the United States near the turn of the century from the 19th to the 20th century. So this takes place in 1891 in New York City. And this is kind of a rich girl, poor boy, but he's not like poor anymore, but he's from the wrong side of the tracks. And his name is Frank, which is just like such an American name. Like they really, really went for that. And the girl's name is Mammy, which is like her nickname, obviously. I can't remember what her like full name is or something, but I just wasn't. Oh yeah, it's Marion. Her name is Marion Green and her nickname is Mammy. And I was like, really? Like, Mammy? Okay. So I was excited this one got picked. I own this whole trilogy by Joanna Shupe, but I hadn't read any of them yet, obviously. This book is about a lawyer. His name is, that's Frank. And he is Mammy's father's lawyer. And what he's kind of helping with right now is that Mammy has been promised to a family friend for the last few years. And her father has given her time because he's like, we know you're going to marry this guy. Their parents are best friends. And he's like, I know you're going to marry this guy. So he never like forced her into the marriage too quickly. But she has a secret double life that she's living. And Frank, he has been keeping an eye on her. So this is something that he does. He looks out for his clients. And he has been going to casinos and winning or cheating money and then donating that money to the people, to some under-provided for families. And Frank has caught her and got her banned from a couple different casinos so that she will stop going in there and putting herself at risk. Because if the casinos ever found out she was like stealing from them, it'd be really bad. And then one of her friends that she's made, one of the women that she provides for, kills her husband when he beats her. Fuck, why am I tired? And she gets arrested, and it's kind of a foregone conclusion that she's going to get the electric chair for murdering her husband. She hit him in the head with a skillet when he had been beating her. And as is a lot of the case, that violence escalated to her children. And when he went after one of their children to beat them, she hit him with a skillet and he hit the ground and died. So it wasn't even like a purposeful death. And so Mammy convinces Frank to be the lawyer of this case, kind of like pro bono. And this brings up a lot of secrets of Frank's past because Frank actually has a lot in common with this woman, where he was the youngest child of a family who had a father who was abusive. And that is a past that he has hidden very carefully because he wouldn't be welcome into the circles that he's made his way into if he let that be known. And so this book was all right. I gave it 4 stars. I like that it was set in the United States. There's a lot about it that was fun, but I felt the chemistry between Frank and Mammy because it's like there right away, but I feel like it could have been played up a lot more, especially for what I've heard about this series. Like, I just thought it was going to be sexier than it was. and I just didn't feel it. These books, I know this just from things I've heard around the booktubes, that Joanna Shupe's books try to do a lot of heavy lifting. That's something you'll hear on Fated Mates a lot of the times. And I don't have a problem with that. There is plenty of historical romances I've read where they're doing heavy lifting. But the same reasons why I don't like just plain women's fiction is that I want the romance to have equal or more importance than the rest of the plot. Because to me, when it's a romance novel, banging is the plot. The relationship is the plot and everything else is just nice add-ons. And for me, Frank and Mammy, they had sexual chemistry, but it became a case of once they had done the deed, Frank was like, well, of course I'm going to marry you now. And there isn't enough of that convincing going on. He's just like, keeps asking, but not really going for it. So we'll talk more about this one when we have our live show, which will be on October 18th, actually next Sunday on my channel. So you have this week to read it if you want to check it out together. All right, then I read Whispers in the Dark by Leticia Newton. This is a Taboo book club read. This was picked by Tamika for our October book club, and this one, the theme this month was Captor Captive. So, oh boy, guys. Oh boy, we picked very different books this month. I picked which I'll talk about a little bit later. I'm not done reading it, but I'm currently reading My Choice, which this time I didn't read the book ahead of time, which the last 2 months I'd like read the book before I picked it. But this one is about a girl that, okay. Trigger warnings. All the trigger warnings, all right? If you're not here for the taboo things, maybe skip to the next book I'm going to talk about. So this book is about a girl. She gets kidnapped by this man. He's an older man, maybe in his 50s. He has a son who's like 20 years old, maybe. And this man is like, here's the thing. This is like a Criminal Minds episode, the beginning of it. Because in the fact of like, if you've ever watched Criminal Minds, you know that in each episode you have the investigators who are trying to find the criminal, and then you have the criminal, the serial killer, the evil person, and you get to see things from their point of view and what's happening to their victims. Usually this involves them like kidnapping someone, and you get to see things from the victim's point of view, and then the victim either gets saved or murdered, like, you know, as the detective. And so that's how this starts out. This girl gets kidnapped, and there's another woman who's also kidnapped with her, but she's been there for a while, and it becomes clear that this girl, what it's going to be like. So the first third of this book is being in captivity with this girl and all the horrors that happen to her. Daily rape, being treated inhumanly. And then we have the father who's treating them like this. And then we have the son, who the dad is trying to teach the son up so that he can start kidnapping women and torturing them as well. And so what is like, just like hard to explain about this story, and I don't want to like give all of that parts away, is that this guy, the son, he latches on to the girl, and his father then thinks he's too weak to get to be her master, so he's like, just kidding, you're not ready to be a master yet, so you're gonna watch me break this girl, and maybe someday you can have your own. But the son, he's already attached to her, and so everything the father does now just more and more pushes the son away from him, because the son feels like she belongs to him and the father is abusing her. So that's the setup of this story. Then at some point in the story, we get to see our woman be free, and the son comes back for her. And like, I don't want to explain how it all works out because it was fascinating. But basically, I'll say this. If you liked Born Darkly by, I can't remember the author, but that is a like therapist and a serial killer. If you liked that story, there's a lot of things about this. This isn't a flashback story, but we get two times. We have the while she is a captive, and then we have I can't remember how many years later. I think it's like 8 or so years later when she is free and our son character still wants her. So this book was bananas. There is miscarriage / forced miscarriage trigger warning, which I wasn't aware of, and like that is probably my only trigger that really hurts me. It's just too disturbing for me when I'm like not warned about it. So there's that. There is torture, rape, CNC, dubcon, torture, so much torture to her and inflicted on others. Like, this book was bloody. This cover does not make you think that's what's in it. So I still gave this book 4 stars because it was fascinating, but I couldn't give it 5 stars because it didn't leave me with joy at the end. And even I've still read some twisted books that left me with joy, right? Like I gave The Wild 5 stars because the book was so bananas that it left me with joy at the end. I know that's weird, but like it left me with joy because it was so crazy that I was enjoying myself. Whereas this one was terrifying and felt a little too real, and you have read stories about this happening to women before who've been a captive for a very long time and then get freed, and the horrors that they'd have to live with. So this was hard, and it will be really good to talk about in our book club. And now I've talked 12 minutes only about 2 books, so time to keep moving. Then I have another buddy read, which I read, which was Bewitching by Jill Barnett. I read this with Shay from Shay Geeks Out. We were reading 2 historical romances together with each other. And I picked this one because it was one I had purchased on my Kindle. I do believe both the first and second of these books are currently on Kindle Unlimited if you would like to read them. These were Regency romances. Well, I only read the first one, but this is a historical romance with a witch in it, and it is a real witch. When I'd heard about the story, I thought that she was like accused of being a witch. That's not it. She's actually a witch, and it's like Bewitched, the TV show, but a historical romance, and it's so great. It's also a grumpy and a sunshine one. So we have this witch and her cat familiar, or no, it's a weasel. She has a weasel familiar. Sorry. Forgot, or ferret or weasel or something, but he like will hang around her neck and like tuck down into her dress, so that's why it's one of those. And she runs into this duke, I think he's a duke, and his carriage loses a wheel or whatever, and they find her, and he like scoops her up and is gonna like take her back to civilization. And she had ended up in this place because she did a spell to try to get from one place to the other, because yeah, she can like teleport with her spells, but it like broke down and like dropped her in front of this duke basically. And then like all these trees fell down and all this crazy stuff happened, and so they end up finding her, and he's just immediately enamored with her. And so he's someone who wasn't going to be in a rush to get married, and there was just like all these things about him, and she just breaks them all. And so she, seeing who he is and what he wants, like this is one of those like, it's insta love, but he hates it, right? So he's just like, why am I feeling all these things for this person? So when our character finally admits that she's a witch, because she doesn't want to lie to him, she wants to say what she is, which is awesome, and she's able to, like prove it to him, he's like, you put a spell on me, that's what it is. And he's like, it's okay, I'm not mad, but please take your spell off of me, because he thinks she put a love spell on him, and that's the only reason that he would have fallen head over heels for this woman instantly. And then like her spells just get them into a bunch of shenanigans, and they end up like the spell ends up like trapping them in like this cabin for a week or something too, which is just so cute, and it was just adorable. I read this book last week, and it made me so happy. Like the book is just so enchanting, and I need to get a physical copy. But there's 2 books in this series, and they both have, I think, magic in them, and it's like legit legit, like there's magic in it, and it's a historical romance, and it is delightful. It's a perfect book to read in October. Pick these up on Kindle Unlimited because it's not spooky, but it is like Bewitched. It's witches for October, and it was delightful. So that was a 5-star, 100% for me. Then I read Fractured Love by Ella James. This one was okay. I gave this one a 4-star. This is about former foster siblings. It is a girl who's like 15 and she's her parents' actual daughter. And then they will like bring in kids. Both of her parents are like doctors too. So it's really cool because it's a wealthy family taking kids in. And they're going to be bringing home a little boy who they think is 8, but ends up being 18. So they bring in this boy, and so like they had done his room up with like Power Ranger and like Lord of the Rings posters or something or whatever, I can't remember, and it ends up being an 18-year-old. So they end up being like the same age. She might be almost 18 too or whatever. And yeah, and then the crux of the matter is that when they finally get together, like her parents find out and they send him away, and he ends up at a group home. And then they end up not seeing each other for like 10 years until they are both doctors at the same hospital. And it turns out that the hero, which you find this out kind of in the beginning because we meet the hero and we see that they've ended up the same place. And then you get a chunk of the novel is all the past part, and then it goes to the future, which I really didn't like. I wish there had been like flashbacks or whatever about it. But there ended up being because he kind of followed her. Like he kept tabs on her once he got out of the group home and kept kind of watching. And so it's not an accident that he's ended up at the same hospital as her. But there ends up being a reason why she never contacted him, even though she could have. And so this one has a trope in it that I don't like. And if you are a longtime viewer of mine, you'll know that there really is only one trope that I hate. And I can be made to love it, but most of the time I hate it. And this one was a halvesy. Like the circumstances for which this trope comes about, I understand, but I still like hate it. So that's why this was 4 stars, because it was done pretty good. But it's still, I hate that trope, and so it kind of had this book on the back end for me. And then I read The Plan by Ella James. This one, easy to explain. This was another 4-star. This is about a couple that they are each other's ex-spouses. So they got married when they were 18 on a class trip. They were on a class trip to Vegas, and they got married at a chapel wedding. And then he was an alcoholic. And so they were together for like 2.5 years. And then she couldn't take it anymore, and they got a divorce when they were only like 20. So now it's 12 years later. And so she's 33, he's the same age, and he's a famous writer. And he's living back in their hometown, and she ends up coming back because she wants to have a baby. And her fiance, she found out that she had an older man as a fiance, and he'd actually been fixed and didn't tell her until they were about to get married, and he actually doesn't want kids at all. So she ended up leaving her fiance for this, moved back home, and so her and her ex, they make a plan to have a baby together. And they're like, there are plenty of divorced couples who have children together, but not many who are already divorced and then planning to have children together. So it was pretty cute. What I didn't like so much is there was a lot of the book devoted to the pre-plan, and then the plan escalates really quickly. So that was something I didn't like. These books weren't very long. Both of the Ella James books, I feel like they would have benefited from another 50 pages at least, because both of them, once we got to the interesting bits, they were over really quickly. And so I'm fine with a story addressing tough topics. I love that. But give it the time it deserves. Otherwise, I feel like you are gypping me out of a story, and that's irritating. Then I read Prime Minister by Ainsley Booth and Sadie Haller. So this is a workplace romance. This is an age gap romance. This is about a, I think she is like the media person for the Prime Minister of Canada. And so he is into kink, the Prime Minister. Not fictional. We're not talking about the actual Prime Minister currently, but he's into kink and they are flirting a lot at the office. And then stuff happens from there, and it's really fun. He's a fun kind of kink because he's actually like a, what's it called? He's more of like a, I don't want to say a pleasure dom, but he's like a mix between a pleasure dom and a service dom. Does that make sense? Because he isn't necessarily into giving pain, but he's into giving you what you want. And so if that's pain, he's happy to do it, but like he doesn't get off on like hurting someone, he gets off on satisfying you. And so she likes just a little bit of pain. And so it was really fun because I like reading, obviously I just put up my recs for BDSM. I love having like all forms of it, give it to me. But it's also fun when it's like a fun BDSM book. I really like getting to read those where it's just like, we're not so strict about if you do something wrong and there's a punishment. Like there's a time and a place for those books. This one was just fun because when they were together, he'd be like, well, like, what do you want to do today? And there'd be a little bit of like orgasm denial or something like that, but mostly it was about he wanted to please her however she wants to be pleased. And sometimes that includes like spankings or punishments, but most of the time it was just like control over, I'm the one pleasing you. So that was fun. And then this is part of a series called the Frisky Beavers. And so we get introduced to the Prime Minister's guard team, and one of those, I think his name is Lachlan, he actually is part of a scene that the Prime Minister and his partner do, and so we know that he's like open to that stuff, and he actually is, I love this, so he is a submissive, but he has worked at clubs as like a dungeon monitor before. And so one of the people who worked for the Prime Minister, I think it might be the Prime Minister's secretary, he has been flirting with her for like a year, and she's been waiting for him to ask her out. And then his ex-lover, who he dated like 10 years ago, they were together for a long time, he joins the security team, and so he is a dom. And he goes right ahead and asks out the secretary because he can tell that Lachlan likes her and he likes her too, and he's trying to get Lachlan to like re-engage with him because he wants Lachlan back. And so both Lachlan and this guy, they both end up dating the secretary, and like everybody knows about it. Lachlan is a little harder to convince into it than like the other guy is, but really what this guy's plan is he wants all three of them to be in a relationship together because he wants both of them. And I love it because we didn't actually do enough with this, but the idea of it gets me so hot because it reminds me of the dynamic between Hercules, Meg, and Hades, although the dom in this situation, the other guy, like he wasn't as like full bore as like Hades is, obviously. But he like teaches the girl how to dominate Lachlan because Lachlan likes to be topped by both of them. So it's a really hot scene because she's like topping Lachlan, but then they're both being topped by the other guy. I'm like, duh, I just love the dynamics of that stuff. I love it so much. I love alpha submissives so much. It gets me so into it. There's nothing like when a guy who's like the most powerful, whether he's a switch or full like submissive, because Lachlan, he would kind of do both too, will let someone top him, especially a woman top him. I just get, it just does things to me all over the place. So this was called the Full Mountie, was what it was called. And I gave this one 4.5 stars. I gave Prime Minister 4.5 stars as well. So then we read this trilogy by Nana Malone. So last week I had read Big Ben by Nana Malone. And this week I listened to The Benefactor and For Her Benefit, which are books 2 and 3. I purchased these books on Kindle, so I own the whole trilogy. This I think I talked before, it's about this secret society that our hero Ben is a part of, but he's trying to dismantle it because this secret society ended up killing his best friend. Like the night of the initiation for like a group of 5 friends, one of their friends was killed. And so they all stayed in the society just so that they could tear it down. And then we have our heroine, her name is Olivia. She works for Ben. That happened in the last book. In this now, she's working on her mother who passed away. She's working on finishing her mother's book. And her mother was looking into the death of these certain women, and we find out that this is connected with the society that Ben is a part of, the one he's trying to take down. But he obviously has to keep it a secret that he's trying to take it down, because that would be bad if that got around. And so it ends up that like both of their missions are kind of connected, because there are these women who are going missing that it looks like they were probably used to be sex slaves for this society in different aspects. So both of their stories are kind of converging. These are fun. This is kind of like an action thing. Like the romance is really great as well. It's very sexy. The sex scenes in it are really great, but they're kind of, there's lots of talking about sex, but not a lot of doing, right? That is like kind of a pet peeve of mine too, of like my book is super sexy, but all we did was like talk about doing it. They don't do it that much, especially, you know, whatever. But it was still really hot and good. And the audio, the guy who does the voice of Ben is so good. His name is Shane East, and he is so sexy. Like, listening to his voice makes me happy. So this series, I give it 4 stars across the board because I wish that it had been a bit sexier. And also, like, you have to read this trilogy in order, and it is one couple. And then there's a second trilogy getting started that's about one of the guys whose name is East. And then I think there's going to be one about Bridge. So, like, each of the books always has the character's name in it. So the next one is called East End, and the character's name is East, so it should be cool. All right, here we go. Now we got a favorite one to talk about. Holy goodness. This weekly wrap-up is going to be long, guys. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not sorry, but... So I read Love in the Wild by Emma Castle. Ooh! This book was so cute. This book I got from my friend Bree from In Love and Words. She did a post about like her recent Kindle purchases, and she had got Love in the Wild, and it is a Tarzan retelling. It's set in modern day, which I was confused about that a bit because it starts with our heroine in Africa, and I wasn't sure if she was like what time period we were in until we end up, because at one point in the book we end up back in society and there's like phones and computers and stuff, so it's like set today. But she ends up on this like trip in Africa, and the group that she's with, they get attacked by poachers who don't want these people to know that they're poaching, and everyone there gets murdered. And just as they're about to kill the girl, Tarzan swoops in and stops and then kills them all, and he takes her back to his treehouse. So the setup for this story, we have the scene that I just described, and then we go back in time and we see Tarzan's family. I mean, he's not Tarzan. Sorry, I'm calling him Tarzan. His name is Thorn. He's called Thorn in this one. We get to see that, you know, like that scene from the Tarzan movie, right? About like why his family was there and what happened to his family. And so I don't want to spoil anything with this one, but I'll explain some of the things I liked about it. So there is a mystery about who he really is. That is something that our Jane character, I can't remember her first name, so I'll call her Jane just because you know who I mean. She, it's so good. She is actively like kind of figuring out who he is based on some of the things that are found. Like he takes her to the site of his plane crash. His family was there by plane crash. We get to, of course, meet his animal family, which yes, he can speak to them, just like Tarzan in Tarzan. We get to see a little bit of what I loved about Transcendence, right? Where this male character knows that like this person's his mate and wants to start making some moves on him, but Tarzan in this one, Thorn, like, you know, it's also that thing of like they only know one way to mate because he's only seen it done one way. And we have our Jane character who's like, I'm not gonna like have sex in the wild right now. I don't know this person. But it's another case of the like, there's no coercion. In fact, it is her asking for them to have sex eventually. So she explains what dating is and that you don't just take a mate and then take them. Because the way, of course, that this is different than Transcendence is that Thorn has higher brain function. He does know how to speak some words. Because when he was left behind, he already knew how to speak, as well as there are limited humans that Thorn has spoken with before. You know, when he's heard poachers talk, and there is one character who is his friend, so he knows how to talk, and the more time he spends with her, the more he can talk. So she's able to explain like what consent is to him, and so there's still lots of hot like jungle sex and like I have to have you right now, but it is all like so sweet because the first time they do it, I'll just tell you this, she's like, Thorn, I'm ready to mate with you. And he's like, okay. And she's like, do you know how? And he's like, yes I do. And so he like takes her to like a soft pallet and, you know, sets up the one position he knows, and she's like, no, I want to look at you, let's do it this way. And oh my god, it's so cute. It's so cute. Again, there is plenty of where we're a little more animalistic, but it's so sweet. And so this book had the perfect mix of they get their time alone. She's only really with him for a few days, and then more of our story gets rolling. And there is flashbacks to him and like his family, and then there is other people in the world that we get to see points of view from. Like Thorn is important. Like there's things about him that are important that he isn't aware of because he's been in the jungle for 15, 20 years, and I liked that aspect. Like with this one, I felt like I got enough time with my couple, but I also, there was more to the story than just them stuck together. Like there is, so it does remind me a lot of the Legend of Tarzan, the Alexander Skarsgård one, where he has other parts of his life going on. Then it's not just the jungle. But it was so cute. The author too writes this really cool note about it of like, this is a mix of like a retelling of the book, as well as there are definitely aspects from the movie. I feel like you'll feel like, I know I got the feels for a couple scenes reminding me of the movie as well. And the author says of like, there is no Tarzan without Jane, and so I wanted to make a heroine who's like worthy of this untainted man. Like he's this strong, brave, powerful man who's perfect. And you need to have a heroine who is like the right amount of smart, but not taking advantage of him. And that's what we have in this book. And it is amazing. It is easily going to be on my top romances of this year. Like, I mean, that's going to be a long list. It's going to be a long list, but this one easily makes it up there. It was fantastic. It's so good. I'm going to buy a copy of that one for sure. Then I read Playing It Cool by Amy Andrews. I read a couple books this month that were with curvy heroines because I'm trying to put together a recommendations list, but I need to read some more of them because the ones that I've read, I feel like everyone's heard of. So I went back and listened to a Fated Mates podcast where they listed some curvy heroines in books. And so this one is I think this is in New Zealand. This is one set in Australia, maybe. And this is about a footballer, and I don't know what the girl does. I can't remember what she does, but he's into big women. Like, he just is. And so his teammates see this girl, and they're like, dude, you should ask that girl out. She's exactly your type. And he's like, I do want to go out with that girl, but football is everything. He comes from a really poor family, and so the money he makes with football, it supports some of his family members. It helps him feel secure. And so he's also like 30, so he only has a few good years of football left. So he's like, I am not uninterested in relationships someday, but right now it's all about football. But then he ends up kind of rescuing her, not in like a big rescue, but like her stepbrother is being a douche to her. And so he comes up and like asks her out in front of her stepbrother. And then she just thinks it's a joke. And he's like, I mean, I'm serious. Like, I really want to go out with you just on a date. And so they end up being friends with benefits to kind of make her look more impressive to his friends and giving him some cover with his friends. So there's more to do with that, obviously, but I gave it a 4.5 stars, and it was cute. Then I read I Dare You by Ilsa Madden-Mills. This was on Kindle Unlimited, and it was on Audible Escape. This book was is he a wrestler? I think he's a wrestler. Who he's taking care of his sister who was in a car accident and has a traumatic brain injury, and things weren't really safe for her at the home that she was staying at. So she's staying with their father, who their father is an alcoholic, and so he is trying to make extra money so that eventually he can send her to a safer facility than where she's been. And then there's this girl that he's liked since high school that ends up going to his school, and he's kind of making a move on her. It was cute. It was fine. The drama in it was a little annoying to me, but I still gave it 4 stars. Then I read Never Sweeter by Charlotte Stein, which was also on the Kirby one. And this book, this is the one that hit me. This is the one that hit me hard and that I related to the most. So, okay, this is about a girl, oh snap. This is about a girl that her senior year of high school, she was run off the road by 2 bullies. And these bullies had non-stop been torturing her for years, calling her fat names, making jokes about her, and she got run off the road. She was hurt in that. It was bad. Now it's a few years later, and she's going to a college, and one of the boys who was in that vehicle, not the driver, but the passenger, he is going to her school now. And he not only is going to her school, but he's in a class with her. And not only is he in a class with her, but they end up as partners for a project about sex in film. So she is so traumatized by this man, boy man, whatever, and he is trying to make amends. And I will tell you, if I hadn't heard about this on Fated Mates and been told about how the story goes, I probably wouldn't have given it a chance, because number one, that's super real, and number two, I was like, how's this gonna work? But here's why it does. Here's why it does. And here's why it works for me personally as someone who is fat, particularly been like fat in high school and had horrible bullies in my life. But also, one of my dearest, closest friends was a tormentor of me in high school and is now a very dear friend of mine. Because guess what? When you are 15 to 18, you're fucking stupid. And you're mean sometimes, and you take the peer pressure of other people to be mean to someone, and you're mean to them. And sometimes that turns those people into horrible things. And so it's not okay for you to be a bully. It is absolutely not okay. But also, kids grow up, and sometimes they realize that they were bullies, and they hate themselves for being a bully. Yep. Sometimes they don't, and they continue to be an asshole all of their life, and that's fine. But people can change. They can. And my friend, he went on to change completely and is such a close friend of mine now. He's designing my website that is going to be coming in the near future, hopefully. I love him, and he loves me, and he has his own family. Like, it's not the same as, like, we're going to talk about the romance that just happened here. But this book hit for me because I do understand what it's like for that person to not even know how to come back for how bad you were. Also, there are some hidden things going on with that, of course, but this is a slow burn, as it should be. It should be a slow burn because he needs to earn that shit. But it also was really sexy. This also is a virgin hero, which was really cool, because virgin heroes got a dick too big and the girls are all scared of it, which is funny. And then this girl that just like, he is just building up her self-esteem. And it was this isn't the kind of girl where it just takes a couple words of like, oh, you're so sexy, like I love seeing you naked. Like, they do so much stuff together before she'll ever like even take her like top off for him to see. He, you know, even once we're past the point of like she's forgiven him for those things, now we're in a relationship together, but I still am so insecure about my body that I don't want you to see it even when you're making me feel good. And like, ooh, that like hits your girl in a painful place. And also the people, so she has more like, well, not more experience, because that's something that he says too, is he's like, it's not that I didn't have any kind of sex, like I just didn't ever like penetrate someone before, but he's done all these things that she hasn't done, whereas like she's had sex but nobody's given her an orgasm, no one's made her feel good, she was just a convenient body part for some people, and she felt that that was all she deserved to get. This whole book is a grovel, first I'll tell you that. So if you love groveling heroes, if you love like, he is, guys, this guy, he's so broken by the things that he said to her and how he made her feel. And a lot of it had to do with his own pain and things that he was dealing with, which didn't make it okay. But as someone who like a few years is removed from it, he is just broken over what he did to this woman. And watching him like, you know, he can't go full bore on it and freak her out. Like watching him slowly get the chance to make up for what he's done. And then not only that, but then to have like love coming from it. Like, it's so beautiful. This book was heartbreaking and beautiful and sexy. This book was sexy. And there's only one penetrative sex scene in the whole book. And I was on fire for it the whole time. It was so sexy. It was great. One thing that took a little bit, I gave this 5 stars, but one thing that if I could change anything, this was one that there's no epilogue. And so this ends of like the final conflict and the final like conversation happens, and then just no epilogue at all. And I was just like, whoa, we just worked through a lot of serious stuff, and then there's not a 5-10 years later or even a 5 months later. It was just, they're gonna be happy, bye. And I'm like, what? I needed to give me more of this. I needed more of this. Apparently this whole series is like forbidden romances, because this one's forbidden of like, it was your bully. It's funny because it's like high school bully is reformed. I don't know. It was fantastic. It had a genuinely like fat heroine. Saying that as a fat person, I can say that. And I felt it. And there was a lot of like her shame and embarrassment, but it wasn't in a self-hate sort of way. Like her wanting to cover her body, it was a mixture of like not shame, but also like not wanting to make like him uncomfortable, which he's not feeling that. He's like, girl, I want to see it all. You're not making me uncomfortable. So I never felt like she hated herself. I felt like she was adequately uncomfortable based on how she'd been treated previously. And watching him build up her self-esteem and build her to a place where she is gonna be a badass was really beautiful. So Never Sweeter was amazing. I read Heart's Prisoner by Olivia Riley. This was the first in a new sci-fi. This is an alien romance. I only gave this 3 stars. I think like there's gonna be another one, and I think it's gonna be the same character, so maybe I would revisit this. There wasn't enough romance in this one, which makes me think that the next book like will be about the same people. But basically this woman, she is a behavioral scientist and a linguist, and so the Earth has these like taken over these planets, and there's an alien that they have in captivity, and she's sent in to learn his language and communicate with him and find out what his like mission is. And what I did like is that this was not a case of like Ice Planet Barbarians where they're like, ooh, mate, must attack, must have. This was a like, he's very, and not that the Ice Planet Barbarians, they are plenty smart and clever, but it has that like, they're barbarians. You know, it has that like He-Man feel where they're like, mate, I gotta sex you up, I need you, I want you. Whereas this this alien, like, number one, he is pretty dark, and it was a slow burn romance, and this wasn't a, like, fated mate thing. Like, they actually, like, fall for each other in a slow burn fashion. But there was just too much other stuff happening, and then once we got where we could actually have some steamy scenes, the author didn't explain the sex parts well. That's a big thing for me. If you've made an alien person where we're like, our body parts are going to be like compatible but different, I need some explanations, which is what Ice Planet Barbarians does really good. This one, he, like, I guess kind of looks like a devil in certain ways, and I just feel like the sex, like, it was a very, very far into the book and then not explained well enough, which just isn't cool for me. All right, then I read The Mafia and His Angel, parts 1, 2, and 3 by Lylah James. This whole series was on Audible Escape, and the books were on Kindle Unlimited. This girl, she's 23. She's been engaged to this one guy for 7 years, and when she was 16, on her 16th birthday, her father, like, gave her to him, and then they could get married whenever, but he's been raping her for 7 years. And she gets a chance and she escapes, and she climbs into the car of her family's rival, who he is determined more than anything to eliminate her entire family. And he ends up finding her, like, you know, she makes it to, like, his compound, and then is like, she's hiding under his bed, and he finds her, and so she just pretends that she was, like, a maid who, like, ran away from there. So he turns her into his maid, basically. She becomes a maid at his house. And then it's actually a very drawn out, sweet love story. This is one that has a lot of trauma in it because she has been raped for 7 years, and he has some ideas about it, but she doesn't just come right out and explain any of the things that happened to her. So that's a rough road for them. And then, yeah, I don't want to give anything else away. This was good. This will be on a Mafia recommendations I make soon. I gave them 4.5, 5, and 4. The second one was definitely my favorite, but major trigger warnings in the first and second book for rape, because she does kind of graphically explain. And then her trauma after the rape by Arturo is his name. It's horrible. It's rough, but they're good stuff. Then I read Little Dove by Lylah Frost. This was a age gap daddy kink, but it was good. It was my favorite line of daddy kink. Like, she just calls him daddy, and then, like, he has some, like, safety rules for her. So there's some, like, punishments that happen sometimes. But this is it's the case of, like, she witnesses something she shouldn't, so he brings her home, and this happens when she's only, like, 17. And for the whole, like, first year or more, like, he gets her a tutor so she can still finish high school. He is, like, really keeps his distance from her, and then it isn't until she is quite a few months into being 18 that he finally is like, I'm making a move because I'm really attracted to you. I liked it that there wasn't a ton of, like, reluctance. He was like, I really am interested, but he never made a move or even hinted or made her feel uncomfortable or anything until she was over 18, and he's 33. So it also wasn't, like, a really horrible, like, we're looking at, like, 14 years. And then he, like, explained what he was looking for in a daddy kink relationship, and it was really fun. I really, really like when there's discussions. There's, like, a lot of negotiation about this. And then, yeah, I love that. Like, what she needs out of it, what he needs out of it. He mostly was like, I want to take care of you. I want to see for all of your needs, and I want to love you and be your daddy. And, like, I'm like, okay, be your daddy. I love it. All right. And then the last one I want to talk about is His Forbidden Desire by Katee Robert. This is the first book in the Island of the Wise, which I didn't know. This was her series that she did just right before Wicked Villains. So actually this whole series, like, came out in, like, 2019. And this is actually about a bunch of her side characters from previous stories, which I haven't read all of her previous stories, but the ones that I had read is I have read the Finalian series, which is a menage. And so there's the crowned prince and then his 2 consorts, which is a man and a woman. So this is about his younger sister, Camilla, and she is going to compete in this event called the Hunt, or the Wild Hunt, where there is like 7 or 8 competitors, and they're all trying to catch the white stag. And so the white stag has to survive for 7 days without getting captured by one of the contestants. And then whoever wins this, either if you're the stag and you survive, or you are one of the competitors and you get the white stag and you take them to one of the checkpoints, you get a favor from the 4 horsemen, which is these 4 different people who are pestilence, death, war, and whatever the 4th one is. And then this series, it has characters from those other books. So there's also an O'Malley who's in here, and Luca, he's from Finalia or whatever. And so she decides to compete because she wants like away from the lifestyle she's being forced into. And so we do get to see a cameo from her brother, who is in that Theo from the other series, and it was really good. This is almost kind of like reading a Hunger Games, because there's like traps all over the island that she can use to try to stop the people from getting her. And then we have Luca, who he's actually one of the 4 horsemen, and he needs her to lose, but he's also really attracted to her and like wants her. And so he, being one of the 4 horsemen, he inserts himself into the game to kind of maybe mess with her, and then of course they're gonna fall for each other, and then it's a thing. But it was good. I gave it 4 stars just because the story was kind of convoluted, and I feel like I'll appreciate this more once I have finished the rest of her back catalog. So Katee Robert has probably about 40 books that I haven't read, because I have only read a small portion of this woman's books. I mean, she's got this whole page and these whole page of books that I haven't even read. So a lot of the side characters, like, I don't know who they are because I haven't read all of her books yet. And so some of the like side cases, I'm just like, okay, I don't know who you are, and I don't care. But the setup of this was very interesting, and I feel like this could be really fun because it's still Katee Robert. It's really sexy. Something I love about her, she's always willing to try new things and just be awesome. So yeah, I really like this, but I gave it 4 stars just because it doesn't have the same oomph that some of her other stories have for me. So, and then the last one I'll just mention real quick because I'm not done with it is I did start Forbidden by Elizabeth Lowell. This is the other book that we are reading for the Taboo Book Club. And so this one, I wanted to pick a historical romance that was a captive. And so this is one that I owned and had been wanting to read, mostly because like he has a mustache and he's super sexy. But I am almost 50% in and the kidnapping still hasn't happened yet. And even when it does, the way this story is going, I know that it's not like an evil kidnapping, which was kind of my point. I wanted to have 2 different, like I already told you about Whispers in the Dark, which is one of the darkest books I've ever read before. I wanted to have a spectrum, but like the kidnapping still hasn't happened and the writing is so flowery. This book is basically clawing its way back from a 3-star because it's at a 3-star right now. So they're not going to be good ones every time. It happens. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap this puppy up. We're sitting at almost an hour because I read so many books. Really excited to start some of the other ones. There's a new Jade West out, and girl, it's a Mafia. Jade West is writing a Mafia series, and I'm just so excited because I love Jade West and I love Mafia, and really it surprises me that I haven't read enough. She hasn't written Mafia yet because she writes some of the most like twisted romances ever, and Mafia is where I find some of the twisty, it's great. So anyway, I'm gonna leave now. Thank you so much for watching. I put in new videos 3 to 4 times a week, sometimes 5, sometimes every day because I'm crazy like that. If you want to connect with me, please check out my links in the description, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.